one of the critical things that we're facing here in Volusia County, but also throughout the state, all the cities, all the counties who have impact fees, is that there's been significant changes at the state level in regards how local governments can actually implement their impact fee ordinance. There was a limit on the maximum amount we can increase them, specifically 50% phased in over a four-time period. What we're looking at doing is using the provisions for a true-up. There's a statement in the law that says if there's extraordinary circumstances and the local government includes it in their report and their analysis, it allows for us to exempt to that maximum that was identified in the state law. That's part of this hearing tonight. What you're going to hear from our folks here are the justification for that, and then to go over the methodology, the procedures, and the final outcome of what came out of this analysis. So joining us tonight, I am Clay Irvin, the Director of Growth and Resource Management. We have Nilgen Kamp from Benesh. This is our consultant that we hired to go through and do a review of all of our current impact fees, as well as looking at modification of one of our existing impact fees, specifically recreation, parks and recreation, as they apply to a county-wide system, and also the potential of adding an emergency medical service impact fee to address the cost for physical structure and rolling stock associated with our emergency medical system. Next to her is Paolo Soria, who is our Senior Assistant County Attorney, who has been keeping us in the lane of what Florida statute tells us we have to do. John Cheney, our Traffic Engineer and overseeing our Traffic Transportation Engineering Division. And also joining us is Tim Bailey, who oversees our Parks and Recreation and Cultural Affairs. I would be remiss if I didn't point out the two people who actually do all the work. That's Brianna and Beth, who are over here. If anyone's had to pay an impact fee anywhere in Volusia County, they know Beth on a first come, first served basis. And Bria has been very good about making sure that all of us at the county are getting the information to Nilgen so she can go forward with this study. Our existing ordinances mandate that we come back either 4, 5, or 6 years later and do a true-up. This is in order to ensure that we're staying consistent with case law. What you're seeing is that, especially with the changes at the state level, at the statutory level, is that local governments have to be able to defend that they are utilizing the most up-to-date, localized data to prove a rational nexus between the impact created by a new home, a new business, on the various infrastructure that we're talking about, be it roads, parks, schools, and in our situation, fire services and EMS. The extraordinary circumstance is something that the state defined, and it's very nebulous. And so unfortunately, when they came through with this new change to the state law, which limited the amount how much local governments could modify, they kind of put this one phrase in there, unless you can demonstrate extraordinary circumstances, but they never define that. And what we're looking at is the fact is that Volusia County has done an update to their thoroughfare road impact fee as of 2018. That's what we're currently implementing, and 2022 is the date that we have to update it. All the others are lagging behind because of economic conditions that existed in 2007, 2013. So we're relying on data that's 20 years old. That is extraordinary to all of us that we have this old data and we need to do updates. So we believe that we have sufficient information in the report that Benesh has done to demonstrate that we do have extraordinary circumstances here in Volusia County, and it justifies us to true up our impact fees, not just for the thoroughfare roads, which we've done a relatively good job of keeping up to date on, but also with our parks, with our fire, and also adding the emergency medical service. Why are we doing it? Well, first of all, Volusia County is the 12th largest county in all of Florida. There's 67 total counties in all of Florida. We're 25th in rate of growth rate. We're 16th in absolute population, and we've already implemented it. The county's thoroughfare road impact fee has been in place since 1986. It's been used as a primary funding source for all of our capital expenditures of the roadway, expansion. I need to make it clear is that, the majority of our gas tax money is being utilized for maintenance. And the reason why? Impact fees can only be spent on expansion of existing facilities or creation of new facilities. We cannot use impact fees for maintenance, and we cannot use it for existing deficiencies. This is a situation which gives people in the public very frustrated. Why aren't you using these to make my road better? Well, do you want us to widen it? No, just make it better. Just repave it. Just do something along those lines. We cannot do that with impact fees. That is your maintenance, and that's where we rely on the gas tax that's not indexed and has remained relatively flat. That's the frustrating thing to many local government leaders, is that they see that funding source has not been able to keep up with the increases in cost. Why do we have this? Why are we going through this? One, we have a belief that impact fees are a sound way of ensuring that growth pays for itself. We have to go through a methodology that demonstrates the consumption based on new development. And again, consumption-based impact fees have been able to make it through the court challenges. These are the things that it basically says, I'm building a new house. That new house will eat this much road, eat that much parks, will need this much fire service, will need that much EMS. And so therefore, this is what I should be paying for it. This gets the facility built. Again, because we cannot use these for maintenance, that's when we start looking at other revenue sources for maintenance, be it the general fund, be it the municipal service district, be it the gas tax. The emergency medical service is a new impact fee that we're introducing. What we're seeing is that the expansion of the emergency medical service is needed. As we see a growing population, the need for capital improvements, which include rolling stock and outfitting those rolling stock, is growing with it. So therefore, it makes sense that as we proceed and see growth occurring, we utilize an impact fee to ensure that they are helping us with that capital expenditure. We currently have 2 impact fees for parks and recreation. These are only charged in the unincorporated areas of Volusia County. One pertains to the local parks. These are the smaller neighborhood parks that you would visit if you lived in an area over, like say, over by Derbyshire and some of these areas over on the east side. If you had a small neighborhood park which was immediately servicing within a 1 to 2 mile radius. We also have what we consider regional or district parks. These are the parks where folks will come from both the cities and the county because of either the sheer size or the sheer demand. So when we start looking at some of our off-beach parking facilities, those are not just used by county staff, county residents, those are utilized by all residents. So therefore, we believe it's appropriate, as we do with the thoroughfare road impact fee, we should see residents of the cities, if there's new growth occurring there, that new growth should also help fund those park facilities. So we're looking at that change as well. So now, what I'm going to step aside, and I'm going to allow our attorney to make sure that we're staying in the right tracks and we're able to get this thing through in a method that's consistent with state law and consistent with our current ordinances. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Clay. Once again, my name is Paulo Soria. I'm the Senior Assistant County Attorney here for Volusia County. So this is kind of like impact fee basics. So what is an impact fee? An impact fee is a one-time capital charge to new development. It is non-recurring. It's one payment, that's it. And what that means is that it's not a tax. It's just it's one fee, one time, one payment, and that's kind of it. It covers the cost of a new capital facility. That it's looking forward. It's addressing the infrastructure required by new growth. It does not serve as a windfall for current residents, as Clay kind of alluded to, and implements the capital improvement element and the capital improvement program. So that is the future costs of, that's tied to our comprehensive plan on what we see as the, future growth patterns of Volusia County. And out of all these impact fees, since the 60s, there's been a body of case law that kind of sets aside basically 4 basic principles of an impact fee. One is an impact fee is a permissible exercise of police power, so long as it's not a tax. That means that it is charged, collected, and expended in a very certain way to avoid it becoming an unlawful tax. 2, an impact fee cannot exceed the pro rata share or fair share of the reasonable expected cost of expanding those facilities required to serve new development. So once again, it's geared towards the cost of growth of new development. 3, it cannot be imposed or structured to provide a windfall for existing residents. So that's basically, that's the fundamental case law. And finally, the last one, so impact fees must satisfy what Clay alluded to, the dual rational nexus between the need for facility improvements and new development. So that's kind of a key term, and what the study is focused on, both on its structure as well as its justification for the extraordinary circumstances. So what is a dual rational nexus? So there's a case, Collywood v. Broward County, that says it's basically this. The local government, that's us, we must demonstrate a reasonable connection or rational nexus between the need for additional capital facilities and the growth generated by the development being charged the impact fees. So we have to connect it to new development. So that's the first prong of the dual rational nexus. The second is that the government must specifically earmark the funds collected for use in acquiring capital facilities to benefit the development, charge the impact fees. So that's what Clay alluded to. You have to use the impact fees to build infrastructure to benefit that new development. Once again, cannot be used as a windfall for existing residents. That's the body of case law that has generated impact fees and has finally been codified into statute. But going back, why impact fees? Why charge these in the first place? Going back, it allows us to maintain the current level of service, and that ties back to our capital improvements element and our capital improvements program, and that is the forward-looking kind of infrastructure that the county sees and that we kind of set. 2, it does calculate the cost of growth as it impacts those specific services where we charge impact fees for. So currently, in Volusia County, we have thoroughfare roads, we have fire rescue, we have parks, and then we have schools. School impact fees are done by the school district. It mitigates for potential large developments. So, so a very large development you can actually attribute the cost of that large development in terms of infrastructure. It's mainly needed when either a local government is experiencing very high growth or there's limited funding available to address the infrastructure needs of a growing population. And the most important thing is it's a means to address the needs of growth while not placing an increasing burden upon taxpayers. So that is the primary benefit of an impact fee, and it's one that's recognized by the Florida legislature in the implementing statute. So going back to the consumption-based methodology that Clay alluded to and what's going to be demonstrated, it is a common methodology. It's been court-tested. It charges new growth based on how much it consumes of that specific infrastructure. Once again, this is kind of hit upon by the courts and the statutes over and over again. The calculated fees of the impact fee cannot correct existing deficiencies. It is only calculated on the additional cost of growth. So what you're going to have before you is essentially the theoretical or potential maximum impact fees based on this consumption methodology that county council could potentially impose. They can adopt at a lower rate, but they have to do so in a uniform manner across, categories. If you can adopt a lower rate of thoroughfare roads, you can adopt a lower rate of fire, you can adopt a lower rate of parks. You just have to be consistent across the board. So I mentioned the statute. That's Florida Statute 163, 31801. Don't bother to look it up. It's very complicated. When I described that body of case law, in 2005, 2006, the Florida legislature eventually took that whole body of case law and codified the primary principles into statute. That's this statute. And what it did is it codified the dual rational nexus, but it also placed limits on the way governments impose, increase, calculate, enforce, and collect impact fees. So the primary one and why we're here is that they must be based on the most recent and localized data available. So, hence the why we are also here for the extraordinary circumstances. There's a 90-day notice requirement for the imposition of new impact fees. So it's not immediate. So the moment that the county council adopts a new impact fee schedule, it doesn't take effect until 90 days from that period. It cannot be collected prior to building permit, so there's a time frame associated with it. So it's calculated at the time of building permit, and we can't demand the impact fee prior to that, say at the plat level or construction plan level. Going back towards not being windfall, it cannot be used for prior debt or projects unless there's actually a nexus that it's going to be used for new growth. Bonds, for example, usually the impact fees are pledged as a revenue bond for that. The statute has put a burden on any challenges. We have the burden of proof as a local government. A court may not use a deferential standard when we have to defend the rational nexus of our impact fees. We have to account for the impact fee collections and expenditures, and the administrative costs must be the actual costs. So once again, no windfall for the current residents and no windfall for the government collecting those impact fees. So a lot of strings attached, and there's more. The fee schedule. So what the impact fee is due is tied to the date of the permit submission. So that's a new feature in the statute. So when we're dealing with credits, impact fee credits must be provided on a dollar for dollar basis. When someone makes a payment, constructs an improvement, donates land or dedicates land for that particular infrastructure, the case law and statute requires the local government to provide credits towards that impact fee on a dollar per dollar basis. Those credits are now transferable between impact fee zones. Most of our zones, we've got 4 zones, but typically, those impact fees can only be collected and spent in those zones. Now the legislature has said you can transfer them from one zone to an adjacent zone or within a zone, so long as the project is being benefited. And also, the credits must provide the same benefit of intensity or density when it's prepaid. So if you get credits for 10 dwelling units, regardless of what happens to the fee schedule in the future, you still have credits for those 10 units. So those are the restrictions that have been placed on the expenditure and collection and increase in impact fees. And the most recent one, and why we are here, is back in 2021, the Florida legislature further restricted the way that local governments can increase impact fees. So essentially, they put a limit on the amount it can increase in 1 year. Essentially, it amounts to no more than 12.5% per year, regardless of costs. The overall impact fee can't increase more than 50%, and it cannot be increased more than once every 4 years. So once you set an impact fee, that's it. Unless, and here's the exception and why we are here, we meet these criteria. So a study within the past 12 months demonstrating extraordinary circumstances, that's what Milgram is going to go kind of explain the extraordinary circumstances, 2 public workshops to discuss the extraordinary circumstances. You are in workshop number 1. There's going to be another workshop in August. And finally, the increased impact fee that doesn't have to comply with those limitations in House Bill 337 needs to be approved by 2/3 of the governing body. So for the, that's generally county council. For the school district, when it imposes its school impact fees, that's going to be the school board. And I believe that is it for me, so I'll leave it to Nilgun.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Negan Camp with Benish. I'll go through the technical calculations. So the basic impact fee formula looks at cost to provide that facility and that's that infrastructure, and that's basically the capital assets that make up any given infrastructure. So it's fire stations, parkland, recreational facilities, roadways, and so on. From that, we subtract any non-impact fee contributions from future development. So to the extent that the county is using taxes to build those facilities, a portion will come from new development. So we want to make sure that we are subtracting that, so we are not charging them once through the impact fee and once through the gas tax or ad valorem tax or so on. So this net cost gets multiplied by the demand, and its demand is measured in terms of travel for transportation and population for the other fees. So this is just giving you a summary of calculated fees for select land uses. So a 2,000 square foot single family home, the total calculated fee ends up being about $7,200 almost, and current fee is $6,300. And then there are some examples of industrial, office, and so on, and you can see again, like the industrial per 1,000 square foot, it would increase from 2,200 to 2,600, 4,100. Office would be 4,200 to 5,800, and so on. So these are relatively, all these are pretty much less than 50%, and that's what we're going to come back to when we get to the extraordinary circumstances, why one of the reasons of doing that. And then this chart shows what the rates would be if they were capped based on the House Bill 337. So the total fee for a 2,000 square foot single family home, instead of going up to 7,200, it would go up to 6,800 with the cap. So that's kind of the difference we are looking at. So the technical study goes through several components for each service area, and starts with the inventory, looks at level of service, cost component, credit component, and then net cost and fee. So if we start with fire rescue, the inventory includes the county-owned fire stations. It's about 93,000 square feet of building space and about 40 acres of land. For when we look at the unit cost, our goal is to really reflect what it would cost to build those facilities today. So we look at any buildings that the county built recently, what they paid for it. If they have any bids for upcoming construction, we look at that, what are they estimating. We look at the insurance values of existing buildings, that gives us some indication. And then we also review what other jurisdictions that built similar facilities, what they paid. So we try to get as much of a sample size as possible. On the land side, a similar process. We look at what the county paid for recent purchases, or if there's any appraisals, what they were indicating. We look at the value of the land where the existing facilities are today, and then we supplement that with vacant land sales throughout the county of similar type parcels, how much they sold for. So for fire, the land is estimated at $60,000 per acre, and the building stations are at $400 per square foot. In addition to buildings and land, we also include the fire trucks and other vehicles, so they overall end up being about $20 million. For fire services, for impact fee purposes, we measure the level of service as stations per population, not the response time, because that's more operational. So in terms of that, in Volusia County, each fire station is serving about 6,000 people. So that's our starting point to charge the new development. So the total asset value with everything ends up being about 59 million. That divided by population gives us a value of about $500 per person. So what that says, up to this point, the existing community contributed at a level of $500 per person into fire infrastructure. And that's again our starting point to charge the new development. You know, we want you to contribute the same. We then look at other revenue sources being used for fire capital facilities, and there's ad valorem funding being used. So that generates a credit on a per person basis. On an annual basis, it's about $5 for non-residential uses and about $8 for residential. And the difference is the new homes tend to pay higher ad valorem taxes compared to existing homes because they don't have the Save Our Homes cap yet. So we look at that and adjust the credit for residential land uses. So then that credit over 25 years, the life of the facility ends up being about $100 to $150 per person. So then we take the total costs, subtract the credit, that gives us the net cost per person. So that's $370 for residential and $420 for non-residential. We then multiply that by persons per unit of each land use to come up with final fee. So you can see a home like 1,200 to 1,700 square foot home would be about $560, 17 to 22 would be $597, and the full fee schedule has about 40 land uses, and the residential categories, I think we have 5-6 different tiers, so that we recognize the differential impact. So compared to current residential fees, about $294, and the cap fee, like 50% more, that $294 would be $440. And then for non-residential, again, right now it's a single fee for all land uses is $150 per 1,000 square foot. So that would be kept at $225 compared to big range of calculated fee. Fire is one of the higher increases, and one of the reasons is the last time it was updated was 2001. So the data is 20 years old. And also, it really didn't differentiate as much in terms of land uses. So like when you look at the land uses in a more refined manner, there's more fluctuations instead of charging all non-residential the same. So this chart provides a comparison to some of the other jurisdictions. You can see, so in this table, and we wanted to show you the study date on top so that you can tell like how old their data is. So for example, Brevard County was last updated in 2000. So that's another more than 20-year-old study. And then we also indicated at what % they adopted. So that's the policy decision. You know, the studies calculate the maximum fees, but the council can adopt them at a reduced rate across the board. So this, we have, I think, 2 slides on this. This slide, the single-family 2,000 square foot home here ranges from $54 to about $738. And this next set of counties, it's about $250 to about $650 or so. So you can kind of see the range. The other area we reviewed is the benefit zones. So benefit zones are used to ensure that fee payer receives the benefit. So wherever the fee is collected, whichever zone, they are spent in that zone. And it's most common for transportation because a roadway built in one end of the county is typically not used by people living in the opposite end. So we want to make sure we have districts and make sure that what we collect from them is spent on the roads that they will use. In the case of fire, right now, Volusia County has the same 4 zones for all the fees, but for fire services, that typically is not used. It's usually a service area wide because stations respond to each other's incidents, trucks go from one to the other, so they have a lot more flexibility to take their capital and use it for anywhere in the county. It's not like roads that you build the road, it's just there. You can't take that road and move it anywhere. So for that, we are recommending to turn it into a single benefit district. That gives the county more flexibility as well, and there's really no good reason to have these districts. Emergency medical services is a new fee. It has more limited buildings. It's mostly the ambulances. So it's about 30,000 square foot building space, 3 acres of land. For land, again, we use 60,000 per acre, same as fire. Buildings, about $300 per square foot for stations, and they also had some sport buildings. They were estimated at $100 per square foot. Vehicles and equipment, about 23 million. So level of service, again, those 3 stations are handling about 190,000 people per station. This is a county-wide service, whereas fire service area was limited to unincorporated county plus 3 cities. So total asset value ends up being almost 30 million. That divided by the service area population gives us a cost of $50. So really, the community invested at a level of $50 per person to the current EMS infrastructure, capital facilities. That's again our starting point to charge the new development. They use EMS fund for other for capital expenditures, so we recognize the credit for that. So the net cost ends up being about $45, and that multiplied by the residents gives you a fee schedule. So again, it's $66 for a 1,200 to 1,700 square foot home, 17 to 2,000, 2,200 is about $70, and then you see some of the non-residential land uses there too. So it's a smaller fee compared to fire, mostly focused on vehicles really. When we compare it to other jurisdictions, here you can see the fees are ranging for a mid-sized single-family home anywhere from $40 to $140. So that's sort of, this fee is sort of in the middle of that range at least. In some cases, fire and EMS are combined in some jurisdictions, but these jurisdictions had a separate EMS fee, kind of like here. Parks and recreation. So level of service is measured in terms of acres per 1,000 population. Local parks their service area is unincorporated county. Cities provide their own. And then district and coastal park service area is county-wide. Everyone uses those parks. So in terms of level of service, the actual achieved level of service is 0.9 acres per 1,000 for local parks and 2.84 for district and coastal parks. The county has adopted level of service standards for parks, and those are 2 acres for local and 5 for district and coastal. So the achieved level of service tells us what the investment was up to this point, what was the, and then the standard tells us what the intended service level is. And for the impact fee purposes, we use the lower of the 2, because if we haven't achieved it yet, we can't charge the new development for something higher than that. And if we had a higher than adopted standard, then, but it was not intended to continue, then we couldn't charge that. Here, the lower is the achieved level of service standard, so that's what we are using, 3.73 altogether. Land values are estimated about 30,000 per acre for local parks, 40,000 for district parks, and $1 million for coastal parks per acre. And in the case of coastal parks, the actual purchases were like the more recent purchases average more like almost 2 million. But their value of the current land was averaging as appraised by the property appraiser was about $1 million. So we went with the lower number since this is new. Now they are very expensive, but they make up a very small portion of the inventory. So out of 1,600 acres, they are about 25 acres. So it's a very small but very expensive portion of the inventory, basically. So overall, then local, we also add the recreational facility values. So overall, total land and facility value is about $60 per person for local parks, and about $267 for district and coastal parks. I think that was just land. Excuse me, sorry, I labeled that wrong. Okay. This is the recreational facilities, and it's again, same type of thing. In the coastal parks, really what's being built is the parking, and that's again based on recent parking costs. That's ranging anywhere, it's averaging about 1.2 million what they are actually building. That's what we use. For local and district parks, it's more recreational facilities, ballparks, tennis courts, and so on, those type of facilities. So overall, local parks value is about $168, district is $39, and coastal is $43. So this kind of adds those two together. So total asset value, lands and facilities, ends up being about $230 for local parks and $350 for district and coastal parks. Again, just like the other fees, there's other funding sources being used for this infrastructure as well. So we recognize the credit for that. And separately for district and coastal parks. So then overall, the net cost is about $185 for local parks and $315 for district and coastal parks. So those net costs multiplied by residents per unit gives us the final impact fee. And parks impact fees are charged only on residential land uses. So it's ranging here. So this is the full residential tiering schedule. So you can see it ranges for local parks. It ranges from $316 to $442. Current fee is about $245. So this increase for the most part is less than 50%. So it would be adopted at the current rate for the lower calculated rate for the lower fees. And then when you get lower tiers, and then when you get the larger homes, it would get capped at $367. And this same type of thing with the district and coastal parks. You can see that fee range is anywhere from $525 to about $740, depending on home size. And the capped fee would be $526 if it was. And again, parks are the same, in same situation as the fire, that they haven't been updated since 2001. So the data is about 20 years older. And the fee schedule, again, is sort of I guess combined residential as opposed to tiering, and that tiering is something that county is interested to provide a more equitable schedule. So this chart starts showing some of the comparisons to other jurisdictions. You can see the fees in other jurisdictions ranging anywhere from $300 to $3,600, depending on the level of assets they have and how expensive their lands. And then here, a few more counties. So this is again ranging from $222 to about $2,300, and part of the factor also of what percent they were adopted and when they were updated. In the case of parks, there are 4 benefit districts, just like fire, and really there's a slight change in the boundaries. We are maintaining the 4 districts for the local parks. The regional and coastal is already a single district because it's a countywide service, and it will continue to be that. So the realignment is just really more to reflect recent annexations, follow the city boundaries, as opposed to cutting cities in half. So this is the existing 4 zones. And then this on the left, the regional district and coastal parks would be a single benefit district. And then the local parks will continue to have 4 benefit districts with slight adjustments to the boundaries. And again, this kind of tells us where the collected impact fees are spent. Roads, transportation calculated a little differently, so just wanted to walk you through the formula to explain how we calculate. So we start with the cost of 1 lane mile of roadway. So that's estimated at $3.3 million. So if you have 1 mile of road with 2 lanes, that's about $6.6 million to build. That road carries a capacity of 10,000 cars. So the cost per vehicle miles of capacity is $350. So every time a car is added to the roadway system, for them to travel 1 mile costs $350 worth of transportation infrastructure. That's basically what that says, like a unit cost. Average home generates about 21 vehicle miles on a daily basis. So those 2 multiply gives us the total cost of $6,900. And we subtract the credit of $1,400 from that, so the net fee ends up being $5,500. So just to kind of give you an idea of how the formula works. On the demand side, for each land use, we look at how many trips they generate. If it's an office, retail, home, how many trips they generate per day, and how long those trips are on average, length of those trips, and how many of them are new trips just for that land use. So for example, if someone is going from home to work and they stop at a gas station, we don't charge that gas station for that trip because they were already making that trip for the office and that happened to be on the way. It wasn't a new trip. Oh, sorry. So, and the sources are for trip generation, we use the National Institute of Transportation Engineers Handbook. That's a widely used source. We supplement that with Florida studies. So those are studies done at the actual sites, interviewing people, asking, where they came from, where they are going, how long their trips was, and so on. And then also we look at the regional travel demand model to supplement that. On the cost component, just like the other areas, we look at the roadways built in the county. So counties projects between 2014 and 2020 averaged about 2.7 million almost. We also supplement that from data from other Florida destinations, and during about the same time period, they average about 2.8 million per lane mile. So given that, we felt comfortable with 2.7. This chart kind of shows you the construction cost trends, and you can see, we had the boom around 2004, 5, 6, then we had the Great Recession, everything went down, and then started to increase again. And the county's last study was done in 2019, and was looking back probably 17, 18 data, and then it's been increasing some more since then. So overall, we also, in addition to construction costs, we have costs related to right-of-way, design, construction, engineering, inspection, and so on. With all of those components, the final cost ends up being about 3.3 million per lane mile. On the credit side, there's state funding included. County is using the gas tax, some gas tax, and mostly the impact fees to fund expansion. And there's also debt service associated with capacity, so we recognize a credit for that as well. So you can see on an annual basis, there's about almost $30 million going into transportation infrastructure, and most of it, about 18 out of that, is coming from the state. 5.5 million is due to the debt service, and the remaining 5 is the fuel tax revenue from the county. One question that we get is transportation is one of those areas that has a dedicated revenue source, so why are we having so much trouble funding it? So of course, as you know, the fuel taxes are on a per gallon basis, and the state pennies are indexed, but local pennies are not allowed to be indexed. And other revenue sources like the sales tax and so on is a percentage, so they are automatically indexed. So what's happening is between the fuel efficiency and inability to index, a penny in mid-90s is worth maybe half of its value now. So you have an inefficient revenue source that's losing its value. At the same time, the cost of providing that infrastructure is increasing. So that gap between the cost and credit has been increasing for transportation. In many cases, now the fuel taxes are only enough for maintenance, resurfacing, and that's kind of going that way. So overall, again, here is the calculated fee for several land uses. Single family mid-size would be about $54.64, and right now it's $5,402. It's a really minor change. It's well below the 50% increase, so the cap fee would be the calculated fee. And you can see for all of these land uses is the case. This is comparison to other jurisdictions. And again, mid-sized single family ranging anywhere from $1,000 to about almost $16,000, depending on what, depending on the jurisdiction, when they adopted, when they updated, and what rate they adopted that. And there's some more here, and this group is ranging anywhere from about $1,800 to about $12,000 or so per home. This is really the same changes as the parks. They are going together, so they have roads have 4 benefit district zones, and it would still be maintained before, just the boundaries are a little bit better aligned with the municipal boundaries and some of the agreements with the cities. So again, overall, this chart is showing you the calculated fee for all the fees, adding up to about $7,200, and the current fee for the same group is about $6,300 for a mid-sized single-family home. And this is the capped fee at $6,800. So when we get to extraordinary circumstances, obviously one of the issues is that the county is a large county and continuing to experience growth. So it's ranking 14 out of 67 counties in terms of its permitting levels, so it's seeing more pressure on the facility. So that's a concern to start with. When we look at the regional model, travel demand model projections, they are projecting that the travel will increase about 44% through 2045, but the lane miles will only increase 10%. So that kind of suggests there'll be more congestion over time. We're not going to be able to keep up. In the case of fire and parks impact fees, again, the fees were not updated, or were not updated since 2001. So the cost and data and inventories and everything is 20 years old. And the technical study findings indicate increases over 50%. And again, when we were estimating unit costs, especially in the case of fire stations, we were getting really high bid costs, and we tried to not reflecting the very peak period. So we use the longer time period, capture some of the lower costs, so the county won't be in a position to having to lower the fees if these recent, cost increases taper off. So on each of the cases, there are projects to be built. So for fire, the calculated rates would generate anywhere from $260,000 to $315,000 per year. And they have several additions, expansions planned that could use that additional revenues. Emergency medical services is likely to generate $210,000 to $305,000 per year. And again, they can use those for additional ambulances, expansion of stations. Parks, local parks would generate anywhere from $150,000 to $180,000, and the district parks $212,000 to $250,000 per year. And there's a long list of projects that are eligible for this funding. Some more here. And then transportation would generate at around 12 to 15 million per year. And again, those would be used for lane additions, intersection improvements, new roads, and so on. So one of the other reasons to do the extraordinary circumstances is that when legislation put that 50% rule, it's like one of the unintended consequences that not all land uses are increasing by the same percentage. And the impact fees need to be proportional to the impact. So if somebody is generating half the trips, their relation should be, like if a multifamily is generating half of single family, they should pay half the fee. Just kind of, they are paying based on impact. When you do this cap, then that proportionality is also distorted. So you could have like for example, transportation impact fee, all the increases, almost all land uses are increasing less than 50%, and some are decreasing even, except you have one or two land uses going over 50%. So that part was not anticipated, I think, when they put that change in the law. So then that's putting a jurisdiction in a situation of either violating the proportionality or trying to go through extraordinary circumstances and not be bound by that. So that's another nuance of the thought process. So as far as next steps, there'll be a second workshop on August 17th. The adoption hearing is September 20th. The fees cannot be effective 90 days after January 2nd, at least 90 days, that's by law. So those are basically, I think, everything we have, so we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Don't run too far. There's a couple critical things that Milligan and Paolo are going to need to address. What you heard was that we were conservative in the cost estimates and those types of things. The reason why is these will be challenged if you're not. If you start utilizing data that shows on the extreme side of your cost, you open yourself up to a challenge. And correct me if I'm wrong, Paolo, now we are facing a situation where the deferral to the local government is gone. It's going to be a much more difficult road to hoe.
Yes, that's correct. As I pointed out, the statute explicitly says that the government bears the burden of proving, fairness, reasonableness, and rough proportionality and dual rational nexus, and a court cannot use a deferential standard. So automatically, day one, local government is on the back foot in terms of defending its impact fees. So that's why it's a conservative average. That's justified by the study. So this is a very data-driven kind of approach.
So now it's open to y'all. We'll be walking around. We do need a microphone, so we got that back there. If we can see a raised hand, we'll get to you as best we can. Daryl does his best Phil Donahue, and it's surprising how many people don't remember Phil Donahue. Right here.
I do statistical analysis, so I just have some quick questions here. I was concerned in the presentation about where utilities fit in, specifically water, sewage, and also solid waste.
So the good part about that, or depending on it does not apply to utilities. That's provisions specifically in the statute. Utilities are, while they are the basis of impact fees, they are calculated on their own through the utility department. They are not part of the impact fee study, and they are exempted from the impact fee statute.
So that would mean existing customers would possibly have to...
No, sir. You got to remember, one, there's multiple water and sewer providers. So the 16 cities have their own systems. The county has their system. There is some crossover between that. Volusia County does not have a water and sewer impact fee, but we have a connection fee. Realize that the connection fee is a charge for consumption at the plant and the distribution system. So it addresses the capital improvements. It's basically an impact fee, but it's tied to a term known as a connection fee. And Paolo can probably elaborate on why we have that differential. But it does serve such that new growth has to pay for its share of the need for expansion of the plant and any other expansion of the distribution system.
Okay, so can you put the slide back up that had, you were looking at revenues for transportation, that the new impact fees, there you go, for roads, for roadways specifically. It was another one that had specifically transportation, what the new proposed capped rates would generate for the county.
This is it.
Okay, so, right, so under that you were saying that a road costs $3.3 million to build, right, per mile.
Per lane mile. So if it's a 2-lane road, it's 6.6.
So if we generate something like $15 million, that means we're only generating about 5 miles? 2 miles.
Two
Total
and a half.
for the whole county, right? I just wanted to be clear that I had that. Yeah. Okay, so that's not a lot of road. And then the other question I had was about the permitting process. When you issue a permit, how does the county go about doing a cost analysis about what the impact will be for the new infrastructure that will be required for that particular permit?
Well, looking at overall development, first of all, remember that the county does not handle development that's occurring in the cities. The only thing that we currently charge an impact fee in the cities for are our thoroughfare roads. So those are your primary arterial roads like Clyde Morris, Williamson, ML King over on the west side, those types of roadways. The development process is such that when someone comes in and proposes a new residential subdivision, a new commercial center, a new apartment complex, they have to do a traffic impact analysis, which John Cheney's staff reviews to ensure that we identify the total impacts that are resulting and the impacts it has on the roadway system. They then have to address any concurrency. Concurrency is the rule that the county cannot issue a permit if a project is negatively impacting our minimum level of service adopted for that infrastructure element. In 2010, that rule was modified by then Governor Scott to allow development to pay and go. So whatever their proportionate share of the improvement, they stroke a check to John's folks who put it in a fund for capital improvements in those areas. So that's handling thoroughfare roads. Water and sewer, the county does not install water and sewer lines in our utility area. That is the responsibility of the developer. The developer builds all new roads within the development. They provide all the water and sewer, and they provide all the stormwater. So there's no capital expenditure by a local government for new development. That is all on the back of the developer. If it's going to be a public right-of-way, we would then assume maintenance after we've inspected it and verified that it's consistent with our standards. But otherwise, there is none. These impact fees are basically what you're looking at. That is, what is the consumption of the infrastructure for parks, roads, fire, and emergency services. And that's what we charge it on, either a per square foot basis for non-residential or per unit based on the size of the unit.
Yes, thank you for that. And another question, does storm water though, when you install like in watering in a county road, John, is that included in your budget for storm water drainage, or is that a local cost?
For roads,
For county roads?
county roads, when we design them, we do account for the stormwater. And it's the same with development. As they're developing, they're required to handle the stormwater on their property. So, and now the other thing I would say is, I know the county road and bridge unit has a stormwater fee for the unincorporated area.
And lastly, will the new coastal parks impact fee, the county's responsible for all the beach approaches, will their money be spent on doing things for the beach approaches like parking, picnic tables, that kind of?
We cannot spend it for maintenance, but we can do it for expansion of those services. So parking would qualify, park facilities would qualify, those types of things would.
How you doing? Eric Olson, lifetime resident here. A couple quick ones. One, I'll be very, very brief. Have you looked at other counties' impact fees? I'm pretty up to date on a lot of impact fees that are happening. I know there's a school one I think is going to be on the 17th. I assume it's the second meeting. Is the school board impact fee?
That's a separate meeting. The school is handling their own impact fees. We're handling
The
ours.
county? Okay. But have you looked at the other counties? There's 6 or 7 counties in the state of Florida, and in most impact fees, only half of them have impact fees. Have you guys researched, from Banesh, Tyndall Oliver, have you all researched what they're doing different than we are in Volusia County and the other counties in the state of Florida?
Can you hear me? What we see is most of the time the counties that do not have impact fees are the slow growth counties. Like for example, Panhandle did not used to have, there are some counties that are growing fast there. So if they are not growing very fast, they are not going to generate much revenue, and there is not as much pressure on the infrastructure itself either. So that's usually like when you get close to 1% and above growth, then you start really feeling the pressure to add facilities.
So if that's the case, have you all studied the nexus of that slow growth county, of how they got to that point, and is Volusia County headed that direction if we stop growth in Volusia County? Because I've heard that before, and my concern is, as we raise these fees and we burden new taxpayers, who, you know, when you put the $25,000 impact fees on their mortgage on a house that, you know, for affordable housing, it doesn't exist anymore. It is a huge burden over a 30-year mortgage. So I'm wondering if, you know, if we're going too far with some of the impact fee costs components as it pertains to the tax base that you're going to have, or the growth that's going to stop, and you're going to end up being one of those counties.
So that's the question always comes up, sort of the impact of impact fees. And there are several studies that looked at it. We looked at it during the recession when some counties suspended their fees to see what happened if they were able to stir development. Basically, generally what seems to happen, depending on what's going on in the economy, the things that are affected is the value of the land. So if you are adding more impact fees, maybe the land is selling cheaper to begin. So it's sort of split between the developer and the landowner. They may reduce some of the amenities, granite countertops versus not. But ultimately what we are seeing is that really the market price is determining, you know, what the price of the house is, and then there are adjustments as far as what's provided for the house. So if you have a house that has a buyer that willing to pay $350,000 and county stops charging $20,000, usually that house still is priced at $350,000. It doesn't really affect. The other thing we did not see, like during the recession, when the counties that lowered it, we did not necessarily see a increase, and counties that kept their fees up, they still saw development. So we think it's more of a destination where people want to be, the market, and there's so many other factors that above and beyond the impact fees that they are not as effective. And then the final component, of course, if they are helping you build facilities, you have a probably more attractive destination. You know, the quality of life is potentially better.
I'd be interested to see some of those studies that you had mentioned from the other counties. Mm-hmm. And my last one is eco funds. We've had eco funds here for a long time in the county. What role does that play in your level of service for your Parks and Recreation impact fee? Because that's a taxpayer fund that is built for Parks and Rec, and I'm wondering if that increases the level of service, which increases the taxpayer base, and that's a tax-funded item.
ECHO serves as part of a credit towards the Parks and Recreation. So what you saw in the calculations, we have to look at how much our costs are, plus we have to look at what the other revenue sources besides impact fees to provide those. That's why, for example, we have a dedicated funding source for our trails. That's why you will not see trails identified as an impact fee eligible project. So we have to account, when she is going through the analysis, we have to look at all revenue sources that are coming in to ensure that we're not just picking and choosing what's going on to arbitrarily cause the impact fee to go higher. So we do have to take into account all of the revenue sources that may benefit that capital expenditure. In this, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's where we're at.
Right. We look at all revenue sources used to build capacity projects. We ask the county, what did you build past 5 years, what's programmed, and how are they being funded? So any revenue source used is incorporated in there. And then in the case of trails, we did not even include them in the inventory, so they did not necessarily increase the fee. Like they are a separate program per se.
Yeah, and I totally understand that, and I understand that you have a credit for it. I think in my opinion, I think some of the things we're missing is that it does increase the level of service when you start talking acres per 1,000 units, and then that is a direct effect of your cost. If anybody saw the cost component as opposed to the credit component, the credit component is almost, I'm not gonna say it's a waste of time, but when you're talking about, less than 5% of the cost of component, the credit's pretty
Yeah.
small.
Yeah, that's kind of reflects what's the available funding coming from, yeah, new development.
I have a very simple question. You had the parks and recreations divided into coastal and local. Now, does coastal mean saltwater only, or does it mean riverbank, meaning St. John's and that area?
We're looking at district and coastal combined. And so that would be like for Emory L. Bennett out there and on the west side where we have ball fields. If we do an expansion out there, that could qualify as an impact fee because it's a regional facility. So it's not just for the coastal parking lots. We've identified that as one of the components, but it's throughout the county, and it's all for large regional facilities, be them active recreation such as ball fields, soccer fields, cultural activities, as well as the coastal demand, both along the St. John's and the Halifax and the ocean.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at, is canoeing and paddleboarding, that kind of activity.
I think I'll ask a question, I think I kind of missed out on the,
Ma'am, we're recording this, so that's why we do want the microphone to be used. I'm sorry.
I think I misunderstood, like, I live in Ormond by the Sea, so there's a housing development there, and they tumble up and down A1A and John Anderson. So none of their impact fees go to those roads?
A1A is a state road, but John Anderson is a county road. Now, John Anderson is also a constrained facility because there's been a determination by both the county and the city of Ormond Beach that it's not to be widened beyond its current conditions. We cannot use it for maintenance.
Thank you. Do impact fees have to be spent within a certain distance of the development?
There's no clear defined distance. The impact fee zone serves as that expenditure component of the dual rational nexus. So that's why you see those 4 benefit districts, especially for thoroughfare roads. So thoroughfare roads are meant to collect, the traffic from local roads and funnel them into a large thoroughfare, so they benefit a large district, so that there isn't a strict distance component. Right now, the impact fees collected should be spent on the impact fee zone, so that meets that dual rational nexus provision, because everyone who lives in that benefit district, such as roads or parks or soon to be gone fire, benefits within that area from the improvement and expansion of one of those infrastructure facilities.
So the impact zone, can that be quantified? Is it a mile, 10 miles, 2 miles?
We've got a legal description, so I don't know if you can go to the proposed, we've got a proposed map, and that's going to have a proposed legal description. So that's where the benefit districts are. So it's not a radius, because, for example, roads don't really follow radii. It's a road. It goes where, John kind of engineers it to go. So that's why we've got these benefit districts, which, anyone who generates an impact in those districts, so long as the infrastructure is spent in there, they are deemed to benefit from that infrastructure.
So what you're seeing right now is that these are the existing zones that we have legally defined and incorporated into the ordinance. And what you see is that we have Zone 1, which is basically your northeast quadrant, and it basically follows the boundary of Port Orange out to a point basically in Tiger Bay. And then at New Smyrna, Ponce Inlet, Ponce Inlet is part of 1. So Oak Hill, Edgewater, New Smyrna Beach, and this unincorporated is 2. 3 is basically DeBerry and Deltona, Lake Helen, Orange City. And then you have DeLand and Pearson in the unincorporated area, lastly in 4. We're keeping that basic structure with some minor changes in the DeLand area to address how the roadways are functioning right now. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, and in Port Orange. Now, the other thing that has changed, perhaps I'll give it a stab, and if you get impact fee credits, let's say you as a developer, we see that you have to do $1 million worth of improvements because of what you are doing. You do the construction, we by state law have to give you credits for that construction. Or if you pay us a prop fair share in the amount of $1 million, we have to give you that credit. If your project only burns through $750,000, you have a $250,000 credit of impact fees. Previously, we said you could only sell them to somebody else in Zone 1 if your project was in Zone 1. State law now prohibits us from having that restriction, so you could sell it to any adjacent.
You can transfer those impact fee credits to any other property within the zoning district, within the same zone, or within an adjoining impact fee zone, which also receives the benefits from the improvement or contribution. So essentially, so long as there is a demonstrated proof that that project benefits from, say, a project in District 2 would benefit from credits generated in 1, you can transfer those credits from 1 to 2.
So Clay, in that example you just gave, the mythical developer has to eat $1 million. Is that outside of his development? Or is that inside the development?
What that is saying is that we've done, John's staff has gone through, reviewed this traffic impact assessment and said, listen, you're impacting Williamson, you're impacting Han, you're impacting Clyde Morris, and the cost of all the improvements for you to mitigate for your impacts equals $1 million. You can do roadway construction that equals that amount, or you can pay us $1 million into our roadway fund. Typically what you'll see is it's a mixed bag depending on what's going on there. So that is assigned to that developer for that geographic location of their development. They burn through that as they go through their project. So let's say they were building single-family homes. He builds out his project, but he's only used $750,000 of the credits that total $1 million.
Who determines these costs? You keep pointing to another gentleman.
John.
So would the proposed 4-lane bridge on LPGA have been identified as a cost downstream?
Yes, when we're calculating what we call proportionate fair share, what the developer owes us for mitigation, we would include the cost of the new bridge. And if they had any trips on that segment of LPGA, they would be paying for their proportion of their trips versus the cost. And typically, my staff, we get it from our construction engineering group who do the detailed analysis. And all the developers have agreed to use, even in the cities, the county cost so that we have a baseline.
So are you saying money was collected, the county collected money from the developer for that new bridge?
What I'm saying is, typically we don't earmark it for a specific project. The cities would like us to, but we don't. We basically collect the money in the zone and then identify projects where there are needed improvements. On the LPGA area, right now we've been focusing on Williamson, and we've had the developers, excellent examples is the Buckies, they went ahead and widened a portion of LPGA from 4 to 6 lanes. Other developers added turn lanes and upgraded the signals and everything. Other developers have paid us money. But with the LPGA is unique because the state is doing a study of that whole area from Williamson south to US 92, and they may be paying for a portion of those upgrades. So that study has just begun.
I have two more questions, and then I'll pass the mic. Mr. Irwin, I heard you say two things, you know, blah, 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 to make sure growth pays for itself. And a little later you said that growth pays its fair share. Is it staff's position that growth is paying for itself?
Thank you, John. When you look at what we have to do as far as justifying an impact fee, and again, our impact fees are what are called consumption-based impact fees. And so what you see is a justification that has gone through a series of, one, statutory requirements as well as case laws. And so what we're facing is these are how we, as a local government, can assure that we are utilizing an impact fee to address the impacts from growth.
And within the four corners, I understand your answer. My question is a little broader. Is it your position that growth pays for itself 100%? Or does that ultimately roll back to the taxpayer to pick up those costs?
I will defer to Ryan Osowski, our finance director and chief financial officer, who has identified the fact that not only do you just saying impact fees are not the sole thing, because remember, once those houses get CO'd, they're now paying property taxes. Once they are operating as a retail business, they're paying not only property tax, but they're also paying sales tax. So there's, just to sit there and say, does impact fee assure that growth is paying for itself? When you look at the total financial way that we as a local government are funded, that is the whole point behind our budget.
But there's also an adage that if there's more people pulling the wagon, taxes should be going down, or pressure on taxes should be going down, not up. My last question is, ma'am, you spoke, you gave the top number for lane miles, 3.1 million, I believe you said, for a lane mile. Then you spoke of credits, and then when you got to the net, you expressed it based on square footage in homes. Do you have a dollar number for now the net lane mile?
So credit is about, let me just see, 20% or so of the cost. So that would be about the differential. I need to do some math. So it's ending up being about, what did we say, 1,400 out of the... Right, 1,400 out of 6,900 is the credit. So whatever that percentage, yeah, it's about 20%, yeah, 25%. So the net cost would be 3.3 million times 75%. Yeah, those people who can do really good math on in their head.
Mr. Schreiber has been waiting patiently.
So I have a question. I can't read all of the print on the bottom. So my first question is, am I understanding correctly that you're working with the cities in the county? You're not working with any of the cities? Because you mentioned, when you were talking about the impact fees, you mentioned a city.
Yes.
Like as Banish, my company?
Mhm.
No, we are not working with the cities. These are just the county fees that we are updating.
Right. My question is for Clay. Does the county work with the cities on any of the infrastructure in giving them beyond these impact fees? The county gives the cities money for infrastructure at any time.
No, please remember, we have our capital budgeting process, and I'll also let John chime in. We have to put together our road program, which affects thoroughfare roads. Now, thoroughfare roads do go through the cities, and we do coordinate with the cities when we are looking at the fact that we may have a funding mechanism, say, for new turn lanes on Williamson, Clyde Morris, or ML King.
Right.
But
So
as
you
far,
all- go
as
ahead.
far as giving money towards their roadways, no.
Be permissible under the, yeah, that whole second prong of dual rational nexus, you know, for thoroughfare roads, those monies can only be spent on thoroughfare roads, which exclude your local city roads and exclude local county roads. So that's what they can be spent on, because that's what they were collected for.
Okay, so I understand. And then the statement was made about annexations, that once the land's annexed, the county's not really responsible. Can you explain annexations? Let me just start with that.
Well, annexation is where a city or, you have a property owner who either voluntarily annexes, which means they are going into the jurisdiction of the local government, be it a municipal corporation such as Ormond Beach, Daytona Beach, and those things. Once they go in there, they are subject to the review and requirements of that city, not the county. What they do have to do in regards to that is if their projects impact a county roadway, they have to coordinate with John's staff to ensure that the traffic analysis done in the city of Daytona Beach, but it's got to be meeting the standards that are set for the entire county. All the cities and Volusia County agreed to a standardized traffic impact assessment that has been used by our transportation planning organization, so that way we're all utilizing the same methodology to come to the same answer. So if a development is occurring in Daytona Beach, Ormond Beach, DeLand, and they have traffic going onto a county thoroughfare, they have to work with John to identify what improvements would be required because of their impacts. They also have to pay an impact fee to Volusia County for the thoroughfare roads, because the thoroughfare roads are an arterial and collector road network that provide for connectivity amongst the cities. So that's why we were able to justify collecting an impact fee in the cities.
Okay, so a couple of things. Annexations are, just speaking for myself, not working out so great. The cities are growing in a way that they can't handle the growth that they're receiving. Emergency services are suffering. I'm going to just take Ormond Beach, for example. We just got an ambulance in the last, Ormond by the Sea area, in the last, 2 years, I believe. And it's about a 12-hour service, unless that's changed the last time I heard. We have no, in Ormond Beach, on the beach side, we have no medical services as far as hospital or walk-in clinic. And there is discussion of moving our police station further west now for Avalon. So if that happens, then I don't really see what's going to happen over on the east side. So data is great, but reality of situations needs to be considered. And so I'm asking you to look across the county and assess the emergency services, because I don't believe that reality is necessarily in that, the numbers, the data.
Okay. Let me clarify, this is pertaining to an impact fee that we're charging for Volusia County's fire service. It's only within the unincorporated area. What you're looking at is an operational analysis that would involve all 16 cities to drill down into that. So,
Well, my next question was going to be, is there a plan for the county pertaining to everything that you've covered here tonight and all those items that were in the first beginning. And the reason I say that is because this gentleman asked about parks. And what I heard is that ECHO funds are being used for trails, but yet we have no master trail plan, for example. I've asked this question and asked this question for a long time. And I don't want my ECHO money to be used to perpetuate development. And I stood up and said that at the ECHO meeting that was the listening session.
Mm-hmm.
I want my ECHO funds to be used for existing. So I'm just making that statement. But since I know there is no master trail plan, I'm asking, is there a master plan for everything that was on that list up there?
Right now, if you went back to the last presentation that went through the county council where we identified our capital plan for the next 5 years that included both funded and unfunded items, that's where you will find that master list. The fact is that we can't commit to a specific project because realize it's 3 to 5 years for project development. You have to make sure you have the funding, you have to have the ability to go forward with it. So right now, do we have projects identified that would utilize these impact fees? Yes. Are they 100% funded? No, because we can't do that until we're certain that we have this funding source. So once you get past the September 20th hearing, if these fees are adopted, then our folks in our financial world will start chugging out the new expectations as far as revenue so that projects that Tim has in his Parks and Recreation world, where Jeff Alberts has in his fire world, where John has in his transportation world, then we can start putting those additional funds into specific projects.
Okay, so was that a no, that there's not a countywide plan to everything that was on the beginning?
No, there is right now a 5-year capital improvement program that was identified to our county council. It identified those projects that are funded and identified those projects that are unfunded.
Okay.
Would like some clarity on the reasoning behind shifting Orange to the District 2.
Big sucking sound from Daytona Beach. Yeah, Daytona Beach and Ormond is consuming the bulk of the impact fees for that Zone 1, and so we thought it would be more equitable since we're always struggling to find a broken road south of New Smyrna Beach, Edgewater, and Oak Hill. We've seen that the capacity has been meeting what we've been able to build. Port Orange is struggling and is competing with Daytona Beach, so that was the main reason.